I absolutely hate ginger. Can't stand the thing. But anyway, we heard from the energy minister just now, Daryl Vaz, speaking about matters coming out of the parliament at that standing finance committee on Tuesday, where the opposition asked several questions about the loan to JPS. And perhaps Minister Vaz felt that, much was being made of the arrangements, and he came to defend against what he felt were attacks. And he also came to add, he says, greater context to people's understanding of the relevant issues. And also, he came to give more information on top of that which we know about the loan to the Jamaica Public Service Company. Vaz's statement just went, so fresh in your minds, I'm sure. Somebody in the chat says, George, I think it's down the affected parish is mashing up Cliff. That's Sharon Bliss. Cliff's problem is that he's just not young anymore. Yeah? When I met Cliff for the first time, he was about my age now. Yeah, a long time that them time they was a fire. Yeah, he's still a fire same way coming out in vexing me, but yeah. His proverbial tooth is getting longer. Yeah? And he knows and he accepts it. But back to the JPS and the loan. I understand that some people sometimes take umbrage at the line of questioning from opposition MPs. They feel that the questions are pedantic. They feel that, as I heard, and I feel so sometimes as well, sometimes. I didn't feel so yesterday. But sometimes, I don't know how many of you recall when the Manat Phelps and Phillips inquiry was going on. And there was a veteran attorney representing, it may have been the former Justice Minister at the time, Dorothy Lightburn. He was a part of the legal team. It may have been Adolph Edwards. And he was going through some details with his client on the stand. And KD Knight intervened to the chairman, Emil George, and said, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, this doesn't sound like questioning. This sounds like bookkeeping. At points on Tuesday, the intervention sounded like bookkeeping, to tell the truth. It's as if the government said the word school is spelled S-C-H-O-O-L. And the questioning from the opposition amounted to, well, why is one O in front of the other O? And she would say, but that's how school is spelled, with two O's before the L. And they're saying, yes, but why the O that is the second O, not the first O? Because, and then was forced to answer that. That's what some passages of it sounded like. But not all of it. And I found some of the questioning good, because not just from my understanding of the issues at play where the numbers in the supplementary estimates are concerned, or the considerations around the loan for JPS and whether it was substantive enough to give them the start that could allow them to meet their targets for full power restoration. What I also found benefited from was the detail of some of the questioning and the responses that they prompted to, fill out that information perspective. So I rather enjoyed much of it. I watched it back last night. But some of it was pedantic and some of it was bookkeeping-ish, of the kind that KD and I had complained about. And that happens. There's no problem with that. It's good to see the parliament at work and good to see opposition members researched, clearly came with questions prepared, pre-positioned, and sought to take the government to task, because everybody knows that they're on TV now, they're on stage, and they want to be seen to be giving a good account of themselves. And I don't mind the quality of the exchange, but certainly something got Daryl Vaz's goat to the extent that he felt it necessary to use postcab this morning to set the record straight from his perspective, because based on how he saw it, the record was being the record lean up, and he wanted to set it straight. I'll say that sometimes you can't be distracted by what in context is the small consideration. The small consideration is that the government loaned JPS $150 million US. That's a small consideration in context, because the bigger context is putting the JPS in a position to restore power to every single household or business that had their power knocked out by a Category 5 hurricane on October 28. That's a big context. So the government being able to lend JPS $150 million US of what they need is smaller context. But sometimes you have to allow yourself to be detained on points of small context. Because I'm thinking and I'm saying, when was a government ever in a position to extend a loan to any organization of the size of JPS? When was a government in Jamaica in shape enough to be able to say, yeah man, you want X? Come for us for X minus 4, and then you work on the rest. That for me is significant. And that is built on the kind of economic management that all Jamaicans should be proud of. Remember, this is one of those things where it's not a JLP or PNP thing. It can't be, because the level of indebtedness of the country, which several opposition members interrogated last evening, and which I enjoyed watching them interrogate. The country's indebtedness is a national issue. It's not labor right money, PNP money. Of course, there's no such thing. Labor right money and PNP money is what exists in the bank accounts of the JLP as a political party and the PNP as a political party. A country's indebtedness, you're talking about consolidated fund and other such spaces, our money, taxpayers' money. Again, I remind you, there's no such thing as government money. It doesn't exist. All of it is taxpayers' money, the people's money. So the indebtedness, our indebtedness. And it's an indebtedness that has albatrossed, held us back for so long. And even though it's a small consideration, very happy I am to be living in a country 25 years into the 21st century where we can lend $150 million US to an entity like JPS. That said, the questions about whether or not the loan is sufficient, given what JPS needs, about $450 million US, it says, to be able to do all of the restoration work. And it's not just doing the work, that's the critical thing. It's the timeliness of the completion of the work. Those are good questions. So I know some of the supporters of the government say, Lord, would them flog the horse there for? Why are you continuing with questions about if that enough? The government now put up $150 million US already, and they say that there are some funds in the $6.7 billion US package that the JPS can access and so forth. So what's the big issue? It is a big issue, because the questions are intended to allow the public to understand if this start that the government is giving the JPS towards the marshalling of funds to do the works necessary in the time that they have set for themselves. If it will result in partial completion of that mission of full power restoration, or if it is a start significant enough to reasonably expect that it will be a magnet for all of the other resources needed to fill out the breach for the JPS to actually reach a target. So none of those questions from the opposition are to be sneezed at, are to be dismissed. And don't lose your patience with Omar Newell or Damian Crawford as they go into the nitty-gritty along that line of finding out if that is sufficient and if partial work is to be expected because only part of the funding is on the table. No, man, those are good questions and answers that we expect our government officials to have to be able to defend under interrogation. So nothing is wrong with that. It's healthy and it shows that the opposition on that issue is in tune and attuned to very, very important issues. Well, I said it this morning, the minister did, you know. When you have light and water and everything at your disposal, and you take it as a given that when you drive home and comes on, flick the switch, light come on. And you go in your washroom and you flick the switch and the heater come on. And you say, sure, oh, you take out some clothes out of the washing machine and you toss them into the dryer, you flick the button and the dryer start work same time. And you put in another load, so one load washing, one load drying. Maybe you have two different units. Yeah, your water heater on, sit down in your couch and your Wi-Fi, a fire and all that. You take it for granted. There are tens of thousands of Jamaicans without the commodity. And I ask you to consider the questions as part of the process of helping those people to reasonably shape their expectation about getting back something that you are taking for granted. We take our first break and we come back.
News Online. Talk radio for all Jamaicans.
My hands were steady. My eyes were clear and bright. My walk had purpose.